The Human Child and the Savage Wolf. First part. The cargo bay of the Zephyrian slave ship. Tormented soul, reeked of despair and unwashed bodies. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species huddled together in the dim purple lighting, their eyes hollow with the acceptance of their fate. Among them, 8-year-old Maya Chen sat pressed against the cold metal wall, her small fingers clutching a worn photograph of her parents. The Zephyrians had taken everything during their raid on Colony 7, her home, her family, her future. Now she was just another commodity in their vast trade network, destined for whatever buyer offered the highest price. Commander Vextal, a towering reptilian with scales that shifted from deep green to black depending on his mood, stalked through the cargo bay. His yellow eyes scanned the prisoners with the cold calculation of a merchant evaluating livestock. The scales along his neck darkened as his gaze fell upon Maya. "This one," he hissed to his subordinate, Lieutenant Krish. "The human spawn. She's too small for heavy labor, too young for the pleasure markets. What use could she possibly serve?" Krish, a four-armed insectoid creature, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Perhaps the research facilities would find her interesting, Commander. Human children are rare in this sector." Vextal's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air around Maya. She pressed herself further against the wall, trying to become invisible. "No," the commander decided. "Research facilities pay poorly. We need better profit margins this quarter." That's when the idea struck him. His scales lightened to a sickly yellow-green, the color that indicated cruel amusement among his species. "I have a better plan. Captain Gorthek of the Blood Moon mentioned he needed entertainment for his crew's morale. They've been working double shifts in the Outer Rim." Maya didn't understand the alien languages being spoken, but the malicious tone was universal. Fear crept up her spine as the two creatures continued their conversation in their native tongue. Captain Gorthek commanded the most feared pirate vessel in the Andromeda Quadrant. His crew consisted entirely of Kethmori, a species that resembled massive wolves, but possessed the intelligence and cruelty of advanced civilization. They stood nearly 3 meters tall on their hind legs, with razor-sharp claws and teeth designed for tearing flesh. Their black fur was often matted with the blood of their victims. The Kethmori had a particular ritual for entertainment. They would throw captives into a pit with their most savage pack member, a beast they called the Soul Render. This creature had been chemically enhanced and psychologically broken to maximize its aggression. No being had ever survived more than minutes in the pit with it. "Yes," Vextal decided, his scales now a bright, excited yellow. "Contact Captain Gorthek. Tell him we have a special treat for his crew, a human child to feed to their pit beast. The betting pools alone should generate significant secondary profit for us." 3 days later, Maya found herself aboard the Blood Moon, a vessel that looked more like a fortress than a ship. The corridors were lined with the bones of previous victims, and the air thrummed with the constant growling and howling of the Kethmori crew. She was dragged by her arms through the ship's bowels, past cells containing other prisoners who would serve as future entertainment. Some called out to her in languages she didn't understand, but their tone conveyed sympathy and hopelessness. The pit arena occupied the ship's central deck. It was a circular depression surrounded by tiered seating, where the Kethmori crew gathered for their bloody spectacles. The walls were scarred with claw marks and stained dark with substances Maya tried not to think about. Captain Gorthek himself supervised her arrival. He was enormous even by Kethmori standards, his black fur streaked with silver scars from countless battles. One eye had been replaced with a cybernetic implant that glowed red in the arena's harsh lighting. "So small," he rumbled in broken standard. "This will be quick sport, perhaps too quick." He gestured to his crew with a massive clawed hand. "No betting on survival time. Wager only on which piece the soul render will tear off first. The crew erupted in harsh laughter, their howls echoing through the arena. Maya was pushed to the edge of the pit, looking down into the darkness below. Somewhere in that blackness, she could hear heavy breathing and the scrape of claws against metal. "Human spawn," Gorthek addressed her directly. "You have honor of dying for entertainment of superior beings. Be grateful your pathetic existence serves some purpose." Maya looked up at him with steady brown eyes. She had stopped crying days ago, realizing that tears only encouraged her captor's cruelty. "My name is Maya Chen," she said quietly. "I'm not just a human spawn. I'm me." The Keth Mori found this declaration hilarious. Their howling laughter grew even louder as mechanical sounds echoed from below. The pit's floor was rising, revealing a platform that would serve as the arena floor. "Maya Chen," Gorthek repeated mockingly. "Very well. Let it be recorded that Maya Chen provided brief amusement before becoming dinner." As the platform locked into place, gate mechanisms began to whir. From the far side of the pit, a heavy metal door started to rise. The breathing from within grew louder, accompanied by snuffling sounds and the click of claws on metal. "Release the soul render," Gorthek commanded. The door finished rising, revealing absolute darkness beyond. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a massive shape began to emerge. The soul render was unlike anything Maya had ever seen. It had once been a Keth Mori, but chemical enhancement and psychological torture had transformed it into something monstrous. It stood 4 meters tall, its black fur patchy and scarred. Chemical burns had left parts of its body raw and weeping. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural red light, and foam dripped from its jaws. But the most horrifying aspect was its intelligence. This wasn't a mindless beast. It was a thinking creature that had been driven completely insane, retaining all its cognitive abilities while losing every trace of empathy or mercy. The soul render saw Maya and tilted its head, confused. It was accustomed to adult prisoners who would run, scream, or fight. This small being simply stood in the center of the pit, watching it with curious eyes. The Keth Mori crew began to chant, urging their champion to begin the slaughter. Betting tablets flickered as final wagers were placed. Some bet on immediate dismemberment, others on a prolonged chase before the kill. But Maya did something unexpected. Instead of cowering or running, she walked toward the soul render. "Hello," she said simply. "You look sad." The soul render stopped moving. In all its years of pit fighting, no prey had ever approached it voluntarily. Its chemical-enhanced brain struggled to process this new situation. Maya continued walking until she stood directly in front of the towering creature. She had to crane her neck back to look up at its face. "What's your name?" The question struck the soul render like a physical blow. It hadn't heard its name spoken in over 5 years. The constant chemical treatments and psychological conditioning had buried its identity so deep that even thinking about its former self caused pain. I am... The creature struggled to form words. Its voice was a harsh rasp, damaged from years of roaring and chemical exposure. "I am the soul render." "That's not your name," Maya said gently. "That's what they call you. But what's your real name? The one your mother gave you?" The soul render's massive form began to tremble. Somewhere in the depths of its tortured mind, memories stirred. A female Keth Mori singing lullabies, the scent of home-cooked meals, the feeling of safety and love. "Kethran," it whispered. "My name was Kethran." The arena fell silent. The Keth Mori crew stared in shock as their ultimate weapon engaged in conversation with its intended victim. This had never happened before. Maya smiled, the first genuine smile she had shown since her capture. "Kethran is a beautiful name. I'm Maya. Maya Chen." "Maya," Kethron repeated, as if testing the word. The red glow in his eyes flickered, occasionally revealing their original amber color beneath the chemical enhancement. Captain Gorthek snarled from above. "What is this madness? Soul render! Kill the spawn! Do your purpose!" Kethran looked up at his tormentors, then back down at Maya. For the first time in years, he was experiencing an emotion other than rage or pain. He was feeling protective. "They hurt you too, didn't they?" Maya asked, noticing the scars and chemical burns covering his body. Kethron nodded slowly. "They took me from my pack when I was young, made me into this thing." "We're the same," Maya said, reaching out to touch his massive clawed hand. "They took me from my family too. But maybe we don't have to be alone." The simple touch of her small hand against his scarred flesh sent shockwaves through Kethran's system. Human touch was different from Kethmori contact. It was gentle, trusting. It reminded him of everything he had lost. The chemicals in his blood began to wage war with his rediscovered emotions. His body shuddered as conflicting impulses battled in his mind. The enhancement drugs demanded violence, but his recovering memories demanded protection of the innocent. Above them, Captain Gorthek was becoming increasingly agitated. "Guards, activate the pain compliance system. Force the soul render to complete its task." Electric shocks began to course through Kethran's body from implants buried beneath his fur. The pain was excruciating, designed to drive him into a mindless rage. But instead of attacking Maya, he moved to shield her with his body. "Run," he gasped as electricity coursed through him. "They will force me to hurt you." But Maya didn't run. Instead, she pressed herself against his fur, offering what comfort her small presence could provide. "I won't leave you alone again," she said firmly. The electricity intensified, and Kethran's control began to slip. His claws extended involuntarily, and his eyes blazed red as the chemicals surged through his system. But even as his body betrayed him, his mind fought to maintain control. "Can't control much longer," he warned her. Maya looked up at the Kethmori crew surrounding the pit, their faces twisted with bloodthirsty anticipation. Then she looked at the various technological systems built into the arena. Her father had been an engineer, and she had spent countless hours in his workshop, learning how systems worked. "Kethran," she said urgently, "how do the pain implants work? Are they centrally controlled?" Through his agony, Kethran managed to nod toward a control panel visible in the arena wall. "Main control there." Maya studied the panel, her young mind working furiously. The design was alien, but the basic principles of electronics were universal. Power source, control circuits, output modulators. If she could disrupt the right component. The guards were preparing to enter the pit to either force the kill or retrieve the malfunctioning weapon. Maya knew she had only moments to act. She ran toward the arena wall with Kethran stumbling behind her, his massive form racked with electrical pain. The Kethmori crew howled with excitement, thinking the chase had finally begun. But Maya wasn't running in fear. She was running with purpose, her small hands already reaching for the exposed wiring near the control panel. Her father had always told her that every system had a weakness. She just had to find it. As her fingers touched the alien circuitry, she whispered a promise that would change the course of both their lives. "We're going to get out of here, Kethran. Both of us." The first spark jumped between her fingers and the control system. In that moment, Maya Chen began her transformation from victim to something far more dangerous, a human with nothing left to lose and the knowledge to fight back. The Human Child and the Savage Wolf, second part. The control panel exploded in a shower of sparks as Maya's small fingers found the exact pressure point where the primary circuit board connected to the power distributor. Years of watching her father repair colony systems had taught her to recognize weak points in electronic designs regardless of their origin. Kethran collapsed to the arena floor as the electrical torture ceased, his massive body shuddering with relief. For the first time in 5 years, the pain implants were silent. Above them, the Kethmori crew erupted into confused snarls and barking arguments. "Impossible!" Captain Gorthek roared. "The human spawn has broken our technology." Maya helped Kethran to his feet, though her tiny hands could barely grip his massive claws. "How do we get out of here?" she asked urgently. Kethran's eyes, now clear amber instead of the chemically induced red, darted around the arena. His mind, freed from constant pain for the first time in years, began to work with startling clarity. "The maintenance shafts," he said, pointing to barely visible grates near the arena floor. "They connect to the ship's primary systems." "Guards, into the pit! Secure both prisoners!" Gorthek commanded. 6 heavily armed Kethmori soldiers began rappelling into the arena, their weapons charged and ready. But they had made a critical error. They assumed Kethran was still their broken weapon, and Maya was just a harmless child. They were wrong on both counts. Kethran, no longer driven by chemical rage but by protective instinct, moved with the fluid grace of a predator defending its young. 5 years of forced combat had honed his abilities to lethal perfection. The first guard never saw the claws that opened his throat. The second managed to fire 1 shot before Kethran's massive jaws crushed his weapon hand. But it was Maya who surprised everyone the most. As the remaining guards focused on Kethran's rampage, she had already reached the nearest maintenance grate and was working to remove it. Her small size, which had seemed like such a liability, became her greatest advantage as she squeezed into the narrow shaft. "This way," she called to Kethran. "I can see where it leads." The shaft was barely large enough for Kethran, but desperation gave him strength. As the remaining guards called for reinforcements, he forced his massive frame into the maintenance tunnel, following Maya's lead through the ship's hidden pathways. The Blood Moon had been built for war, not efficiency. Its maintenance systems were a maze of redundant passages designed to allow repairs during battle damage. Maya navigated them with the instinctive understanding that came from a childhood spent in the engineering sections of Colony 7. "Where are we going?" Kethran whispered as they crawled through a particularly narrow section. "The engine room," Maya replied confidently. "Every ship has the same basic layout. If I can access the primary power distribution, I can cause a cascade failure that will cripple their systems." Kethran stared at the small human in amazement. "You understand their technology?" "Technology is technology," Maya said simply. "Aliens might use different materials or power sources, but the basic principles are the same. Energy flows from source to destination through the path of least resistance. Create enough resistance, and the energy finds somewhere else to go." They emerged from the maintenance shaft into a secondary corridor. The ship's emergency lighting cast everything in a hellish red glow, and alarm sounds echoed from every direction. The crew was searching for them, but they were looking in all the wrong places. As they made their way toward the engine compartment, Maya noticed something that made her stop in her tracks. Through a transparent aluminum window, she could see the ship's holding cells where other prisoners were kept. Dozens of beings from various species huddled in cramped cages, their eyes reflecting the same hopelessness she had felt just hours ago. "We can't leave them," she said firmly. Kethran looked at the cells, then at the small human beside him. "Maya, there are too many guards. We barely escaped the pit. If we try to free the others—" "Then we'll die trying," Maya interrupted. "But we'll die as people, not as entertainment." Something in her voice reminded Kethran of his own mother, who had always insisted that true strength came from protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. He nodded slowly. "What do you need me to do?" Maya studied the security setup with the same analytical approach she had used on the arena controls. The cell locks are electronically controlled from a central terminal. If I can access it, I can open all the cages at once, but you'll need to deal with the guards. How many? Catherine asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't matter. 8, maybe 10. They're not expecting an attack from this direction. Kethron's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile on a human face, but was purely predatory on his lupine features. I have 5 years of rage to work through. 10 guards should be a good start. They approached the holding area from the maintenance tunnels, emerging directly behind the guard station. Maya immediately went to work on the control terminal, while Kethron positioned himself between her and the guards. The first guard died before he could raise an alarm. The second managed to shout a warning before Kethron's claws found his spine. Then chaos erupted as the remaining guards realized they were under attack. But these guards had never faced a Kethmori fighting for something other than their own survival. Kethran moved through them like a force of nature, his every motion efficient and deadly. Years of arena combat had taught him to kill quickly and without hesitation. Maya's fingers flew over the alien interface. The lock system was more complex than the arena controls, but she could see the pattern: power flows, authentication protocols, backup systems. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Every lock is just a puzzle waiting to be solved, Maya. Find the key, and everything opens. Almost got it, she muttered as Kethron finished the last guard. Just need to bypass the authentication matrix and... There. Every cell door in the holding area opened simultaneously. The prisoners, initially confused by their sudden freedom, began to emerge cautiously. There were humans from other raided colonies, Centaurians with their distinctive blue skin, insectoid Velkari workers, and even a few members of species Maya didn't recognize. "The docking bays!" shouted one of the humans, a middle-aged woman with the bearing of a former military officer. "If we can reach the captured ships, we can escape." But Kethran was already shaking his head. "The docking bay controls are in the command center. It's the most heavily guarded section of the ship." Maya was studying a ship schematic displayed on the guard station monitors. Her young mind was working through possibilities at lightning speed. "What if we don't need to reach the docking bays?" she said slowly. "What do you mean?" asked the former officer. "This ship has escape pods," Maya explained, pointing to locations marked on the schematic. "They're distributed throughout the vessel for emergency evacuation. If we could coordinate a mass launch..." "The pods only hold 2 or 3 people each," Kethran pointed out. "But they're designed to operate independently," Maya continued. "And look at this." She highlighted a section of the ship's technical specifications. "The escape pod systems have override capabilities for emergency situations. If I can trigger a ship-wide emergency signal..." The former officer leaned closer to the display. "You want to convince the ship's computer that we're under attack?" "Better," Maya said with a grin that was becoming increasingly unsettling. "I want to convince it that the ship is suffering a critical system failure. When that happens, the escape pods automatically activate and begin launch sequences. All we have to do is get to them before the crew figures out what's happening." She began working on the ship's main computer system, her small hands moving with growing confidence across the alien interface. The programming language was different, but the logical structures were familiar. Conditional statements, loop protocols, error handling routines, the building blocks of intelligence, whether human or alien. "Security breach detected in primary holding area," the ship's computer announced in its cold, mechanical voice. "Initiating lockdown procedures." "Too late for that," Maya murmured as she inserted a carefully crafted virus into the ship's monitoring systems. "Let's see how you handle this." Her virus was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to destroy the ship's systems, it fed them false information. Sensor readings indicating hull breaches, power fluctuations suggesting imminent core failure. Navigation data showing collision courses with asteroids that didn't exist. Critical system failure detected, the computer announced. Multiple hull breaches. Core containment at 60%. All personnel to escape pods. Repeat, all personnel to escape pods. The ship's lighting switched to emergency mode, and automated systems began preparing for evacuation. Throughout the vessel, escape pod bays opened and launch sequences initiated. "Now!" Maya shouted. The freed prisoners scattered throughout the ship, each group heading for the nearest escape pod bay. Maya and Kethran led one group through corridors, now filled with confused Kethmori crew members who couldn't understand why their ship was apparently dying around them. They reached their designated escape pod just as Captain Gorthek's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "This is impossible. All systems show normal. It's the human spawn. She's poisoned our computers." But it was too late. Maya and Kethran squeezed into their escape pod along with 3 other prisoners, 2 humans and a Zentorian engineer. As the pod systems activated, Maya couldn't resist one final insult to their former captors. She accessed the escape pod's communication array and sent a message to every receiver in the local system. "This is Maya Chen, formerly prisoner of the pirate vessel Blood Moon. I want everyone to know that the great Captain Gorthek and his feared crew were outsmarted by an 8-year-old human and a Kethmori who remembered what it meant to be more than a weapon." The pod launched just as the first Kethmori guards reached their bay. Through the small viewport, Maya watched as dozens of other pods streaked away from the Blood Moon in all directions. Her plan had worked. Most of the prisoners were escaping. "Where are we going?" asked the Zentorian engineer. Maya checked the pod's navigation system. "The nearest inhabited system is Kepler Station. It's a trading post, but it has strict neutrality agreements. Even pirates can't operate there openly." "What about you?" one of the human prisoners asked Kethran. "Your own people will hunt you for helping us escape." Kethran looked at Maya, who was already working on modifying the escape pod's communication systems to boost their signal range. "My people stopped being my people when they threw me in that pit," he said quietly. "This small human has shown me more kindness in one day than I received in 5 years of captivity." Maya looked up from her work with a serious expression that seemed far too old for her 8-year-old face. "We're not done yet," she said simply. "There are still ships full of slaves out there, more children being sold, more people being broken like they broke Kethran." "What are you suggesting?" the former military officer asked. Maya's brown eyes hardened with determination. "I'm suggesting that maybe it's time someone taught these pirates that humans don't make good victims, and that we're very, very good at making people regret underestimating us." She turned back to her work on the communication array, her small fingers already planning modifications that would turn a simple escape pod into something much more dangerous. Behind them, the Blood Moon was disappearing into the distance, its crew still struggling to understand how their perfect weapon had been turned against them by a child. But Maya Chen was no longer just a child. She was becoming something that would soon strike fear into the hearts of every slaver and pirate in the galaxy. She was becoming a human with a purpose, and that was the most dangerous thing in the universe. The Human Child and the Savage Wolf. Third part. 3 years had passed since the escape from the Blood Moon, and the galaxy had learned to fear 2 names: Maya Chen and her companion, known throughout the Outer Rim simply as the Wolf. What had begun as a desperate escape had evolved into something far more significant: a systematic campaign against the slave trade that was reshaping the balance of power in the Andromeda Quadrant. Their ship, the Liberation, bore little resemblance to the escape pod they had arrived at Kepler Station in. Maya had spent months studying captured alien technologies, reverse engineering systems, and designing improvements that no alien engineer had ever imagined. The vessel was a hybrid of human ingenuity and alien capability that made it unlike anything else in space. Kethran, now 11 feet tall in his full adult form, stood at the bridge's tactical station reviewing their latest intelligence reports. The chemical treatments from his captivity had been gradually purged from his system, but his combat skills remained sharp. More importantly, he had developed into something the galaxy had never seen before, a Keth Mori fighting not for personal glory or pack dominance, but for justice. The Zephyrian slaver, Tormented Soul, will be passing through the Nexus system in 6 hours, he reported to Maya, who was now 11 years old, but possessed the focused intensity of someone much older. Same ship that captured you originally. Captain Vextal is still in command. Maya's hands paused over the engineering console she was modifying. The mention of that particular ship brought back memories she had learned to channel into fuel for her mission. How many prisoners aboard? Intelligence suggests approximately 200, mostly humans from the recent raids on the outer colony worlds, children among them. Then we give Captain Vextal a lesson in why humans don't make good slaves, Maya said, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that had become her trademark. The Liberation dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus system, immediately engaging stealth systems that Maya had designed by combining human radar absorption principles with alien cloaking technology. On sensors, they appeared to be nothing more than a small asteroid drifting through space. Target acquired, Kethran reported. The Tormented Soul is following the predicted route. Minimal escort. They're overconfident. Maya studied the tactical display with the analytical mind that had become legendary throughout the galaxy's criminal underworld. In 3 years, she had never lost a single rescued prisoner, and her reputation for turning the hunters into the hunted was spreading fear through every slaver organization. Standard Liberation Protocol, she announced to her crew. The Liberation now carried 15 people, former slaves from various species who had chosen to join their mission rather than return to their home worlds. Each had skills that contributed to their operations: former military personnel, engineers, computer specialists, and infiltration experts. Shakala, begin electronic warfare protocols. I want their communications jammed and their navigation systems feeding them false position data. Timur, prepare the boarding pods. Kethran, you know what to do. The Zentaurian communications officer, Jkala, nodded as her forearms danced across multiple control interfaces simultaneously. Jammers active, they're blind and deaf. Timur, a former Velkari Special Forces operative whose insectoid species excelled at rapid deployment operations, began coordinating the boarding teams. Pods loaded and ready, targeting their engine control and bridge sections. But it was Kethran's role that struck fear into the hearts of slavers throughout the galaxy. 3 years of fighting alongside Maya had taught him to weaponize not just his physical capabilities, but his species' psychological reputation. When Kethmori pirates saw one of their own fighting against them, it shattered their assumptions about their superiority. Remember, Maya said as the Liberation moved into attack position, we're not here for revenge. We're here for the prisoners. Priority is their safety. Everything else is secondary. The Tormented Soul never saw the attack coming. Their first indication of trouble was when their communication systems failed simultaneously with their navigation. By the time they realized they were under attack, boarding pods were already attaching to their hull like mechanical parasites. Captain Vextal, his scales shifting to the deep black of rage and fear, watched his bridge displays as his ship was systematically taken apart by forces he couldn't understand. How are they penetrating our shields? He roared at his technical staff. Unknown, Captain, replied his chief engineer. The attacks are coming from directions our sensors indicate are empty space. It's as if they're invisible. Nothing is invisible. Find them! But Maya had spent 3 years studying Zephyrian shield technology, and she had discovered something their engineers had never considered. Human mathematical principles, particularly fractal geometry, allowed for signal frequencies that could slip through the harmonic gaps in alien shield matrices. What seemed impossible to Zephyrian physics was elementary to human science. The boarding actions were swift and precise. Each team knew exactly where to strike to minimize casualties while maximizing disruption. Kethrin led the assault on the bridge, his massive form moving through the corridors with the fluid grace of a predator who had learned to hunt for justice rather than sport. The Zephyrian crew's resistance collapsed when Kethrin appeared on their bridge, his amber eyes burning with controlled fury. They had heard the stories. The Keth Mori who fought alongside the human child, the wolf who had turned against his own species' savage nature. Seeing him in person broke their morale completely. "Captain Vextal," Kethran said in perfect Zephyrian, his voice carrying undertones that spoke directly to the reptilian's fear centers. "I believe you remember a human child you sold 3 years ago?" Vextal's scales had turned completely white with terror. The human spawn. But she was just a child. How could she... She was never just a child, Kethran corrected. She was a human child. There's a difference you failed to understand. Maya's voice came through the ship's communication system, her tone calm and professional. "Captain Vextal, this is Maya Chen. Your ship has been captured, your crew is secure, and your prisoners are being transferred to safety. You have a choice to make." "What? What do you want?" Vextal managed to croak. "Information, supply routes, other slaver operations, buyer networks. Provide complete cooperation, and you and your crew will be turned over to Galactic Authority peacekeeping forces. Refuse, and you'll be released in an escape pod with enough supplies to reach the nearest inhabited system, where everyone will know you as the captain who was defeated by an 11-year-old human." The threat of professional humiliation was more effective than any physical torture could have been. Within hours, Vextal had provided detailed intelligence about 3 other major slaver operations, including the location of a processing center where captured beings were sorted and prepared for auction. As the rescued prisoners were transferred to the Liberation, Maya walked through the cargo bay where she had once been held captive. But now she saw it through different eyes. Not as a victim, but as an engineer analyzing the systematic dehumanization built into every aspect of the ship's design. "The psychological conditioning starts here," she explained to her crew as they documented the ship for evidence. "The lighting frequency is designed to induce despair. The temperature variations break down resistance. Even the sound dampening is calculated to make prisoners feel isolated and helpless." Sarah Martinez, a former Earth military officer who had become Maya's tactical advisor, studied the setup with professional interest. "Sophisticated psychological warfare. They've turned captivity into a science." "Then we'll turn liberation into a science too," Maya replied. "Every technique they use to break people, we can reverse to help them recover. Every system they use to process victims, we can adapt to process intelligence about their operations. Over the following months, the Liberation and its growing fleet of liberated vessels systematically dismantled the slave trade networks in the Andromeda Quadrant. But Maya's greatest weapon wasn't her ship or her crew. It was the simple fact that she represented something slavers had never encountered before. Every alien species in the galaxy had accepted slavery as an inevitable part of civilization. The strong preyed upon the weak, the technologically advanced enslaved the primitive, and the cycle continued across millennia. It was considered a natural law, as unchangeable as gravity or entropy. But humans had never accepted slavery as natural. Even when practicing it themselves in their darker periods, there had always been humans who recognized it as wrong and fought against it. This fundamental rejection of the concept was something alien slavers couldn't understand or counter. Maya didn't just rescue slaves, she systematically destroyed the economic and social structures that made slavery profitable. She leaked slaver communications to rival criminal organizations, causing trust breakdowns and internal conflicts. She flooded markets with fake slave auction announcements, wasting their resources on non-existent opportunities. She even began broadcasting educational programs to primitive worlds, teaching them defensive technologies and tactics before the slavers could arrive. The final confrontation came when the Slavers Consortium, an alliance of the galaxy's major slave trading organizations, decided to end the Maya Chen problem permanently. They assembled a fleet of 30 warships, including several Kethmori battlecruisers, and set a trap using captured human children as bait. But they had made a critical error. They assumed Maya would respond emotionally to the threat against human children, rushing into their trap without proper preparation. Instead, she responded with the cold, analytical intelligence that had made her legendary. "They're expecting us to charge in and try to rescue the hostages immediately," she explained to her assembled fleet commanders. "Instead, we're going to do what humans do best. We're going to change the rules of the game." The trap was set in the Zerion system, where the consortium fleet waited in a perfect ambush formation around a fake distress beacon. When the Liberation appeared to take the bait, the slavers prepared for a quick victory. Instead, Maya's ship broadcast a simple message on all frequencies. "Attention Consortium Fleet. You are hereby notified that this system has been designated a human protection zone. Any vessel engaging in hostile action against human beings will be considered an act of war against humanity. You have 1 hour to release all prisoners and withdraw." The consortium commanders laughed at what they saw as an empty threat. Earth was dozens of light years away, and human military presence in this region was minimal. What they didn't know was that Maya had spent the past year building something unprecedented. A coalition of liberated worlds and species who had united under human leadership for the first time in galactic history. When the hour deadline passed, the sky lit up with hyperspace exits. Ships emerged from jump points throughout the system, not just Maya's fleet, but vessels from every species and world that had been touched by her liberation campaigns. Zentaurian cruisers, Velkari strike fighters, even reformed Kethmori warriors who had chosen to follow Kethron's example, but the most stunning sight was the appearance of Earth's expeditionary fleet, led by Admiral Catherine Reeves aboard the UEN Vengeance. Humanity had finally decided to take an active role in galactic affairs, and they had chosen Maya Chen as their champion. "Consortium vessels," Admiral Reeves announced. "This is Admiral Reeves of the United Earth Navy. The human child you thought to use as bait has proven something we've been trying to explain for 3 years. Humans don't make good victims, but we make excellent allies. You are outgunned, outnumbered, and surrounded. Surrender immediately." The battle that followed was less a conflict than a demonstration. The consortium fleet, designed to prey upon the weak and defenseless, found itself facing an enemy that had learned to fight like humans, with tactical flexibility, technological innovation, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Captain Gorthek, commanding one of the Kethmori battlecruisers, found his ship being systematically disabled by weapons he couldn't even identify. As his bridge systems failed around him, he heard a familiar voice on the communication system. "Hello, Captain Gorthek. This is Maya Chen. I believe we have some unfinished business." The Liberation appeared alongside his crippled vessel, its weapons trained on his bridge. But instead of destroying him, Maya did something far more devastating to his pride. She ignored him completely. "All consortium vessels have been disabled," she announced to the fleet. "Prisoners are being transferred to safety. Slaver crews will be processed according to Galactic Authority protocols. Captain Gorthek, you and your crew will be returned to Kethmori space with a message for your high-pack leader." "What message?" Gorthek managed to ask. "That humanity is no longer accepting applications for predators. We're only interested in partners now." In the years that followed, The Xerion incident became known as the moment when humanity announced its presence on the galactic stage not through conquest or dominance, but through the simple declaration that some things were unacceptable, regardless of tradition or profit. Maya Chen, now recognized as Earth's youngest admiral and the founder of the Galactic Liberation Corps, stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Hope Restored. Kethran stood beside her, wearing the insignia of the first non-human officer in Earth's Navy. The Outer Rim worlds are reporting zero slaver activity for the 6th consecutive month, he reported with satisfaction. Maya nodded, studying the stellar map that showed a galaxy slowly learning what humans had known all along, that strength should protect the weak, not exploit them. At 14 years old, she had become something no alien species had ever produced, a child who had grown up to change the universe. "What's our next mission, Admiral?" asked Commander Martinez. Maya smiled, the same gentle expression she had shown to a broken Kethmori warrior in an arena pit 6 years ago. There are still children out there who need to learn that they're not alone. Still people who think being strong means hurting others. We're going to show them a better way. She turned to address her bridge crew, representatives of a dozen species who had chosen to follow humanity's example. Set course for the frontier territories. We have work to do. The Hope Restored jumped to hyperspace, carrying with it the message that had transformed the galaxy. Humans don't make good victims, but they make excellent heroes. And sometimes that makes all the difference.